Thank you, Andrea and Delaware Valley Grantmakers for inviting me and for addressing this really important topic of waste and consumption. I feel fortunate to have been in the restaurant business for many years because people love to eat and they love to talk about good food, but few people really stop to think about where our waste goes to. And yet composting is, and the natural cycle is one of the most important parts of sustainability, to compost our food so that that waste goes to enriching our soil for the next harvest. And all of life has this cycle of birth and use and death and so on, and so do the products that we make. Yet again, it's the rare individual that really addresses consumption and waste. Martin Luther King used to talk about the triple evils of racism, militarism, and materialism. And groups like the Religious Society of Friends and the Delaware Grantmakers and many of the progressive groups that we all belong to have spent many, many years dealing with the issues of materialism and racism. But that issue of materialism is a hard one for us. And I think it's a hard one for me. I think it's a real challenge to us as individuals to really stop and think before we buy something. Do we really need that? What is going to happen with that article when we're finished with it? As a society, to really think about the United States and how we are 5% of the world population, yet we consume more than 25% of the natural resources. These are challenges for all of us, and again, it's the rare individual that really goes there. I met Annie Leonard 17 years ago when she came on a white dog trip to Cuba. And I couldn't understand why this young woman wanted more than anything else to go to see the Havana dump. And I said, you know, there's beaches to swim in, there's music, there's rum, there's dancing, and all these great things. And why do you want to go to the dump? And Annie told me later that she was so sad that no one in our group wanted to go to the dump except for her mother, who was along on the trip. So her mother accompanied her to the dump. And she actually found to be that the Havana dump was one of the cleanest dumps and the smallest dumps that she had ever run into. But little did I know back then in 1993 that Annie was already well on her way to becoming an expert on dumps and trash and waste, and was working with Greenpeace and the International Waste Trade Campaign to oppose the exportation of toxic waste. And she spent 10 years tracking hazardous waste shipments to Africa and China and India and Bangladesh, and visited dumps and factories in 40 different countries before she decided to come home and focus her work on the United States, because she found that the United States shipped more hazardous waste to other countries than any other country, and that our wasteful consumption was really a danger to the world. So for a number of years, she did talks about consumption and waste, and then came up with the idea that if she did a film, this would save her a lot of time and she could reach more people. And she thought, well, if she could get 50,000 people to watch her film, that would really be great. Well, here we are with, at this point, over 50,000 people having seen the film. I mean, over 10 million people having seen the film in 225 countries around the world, and in many languages, and now The Story of Stuff is also a book. And I realized how much my own consciousness was raised by Annie's work, and how many people that she's touched, and now has gone on to make other films, The Story of Bottled Water. And I was just thinking today, as I put water into a plastic cup, damn, I forgot my canteen again. You know, and when will the day come that we each arrive at this meeting and all of our meetings with a canteen of water, with a mug for coffee. I've even gotten now into, when I'm traveling on airplanes, of taking a little bamboo set of utensils with me in my backpack so that I don't have to pick up plastic utensils. But there's so many things like that we can do in our lives and should be doing. That Annie is bringing into our consciousness with these films. She also did one on cosmetics, another area of waste. I just saw on the news where a high school decided to develop a club of girls that would not wear any makeup. And it's become extremely popular. I never even realized that high school people wore makeup, and we didn't back in our day, right? The good old days. Anyway, it's happening, and people are starting to pay attention to these issues, and Annie is getting deeper and deeper, into issues that really matter to ultimately our survival on planet Earth. So let's all welcome a champion in the fight against materialism and consumption, and a lover of empty dumps and open minds. So that would be Annie Leonard.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here. So I want to say how great it is to be back in Philadelphia. I have a warm spot for Philadelphia. I lived in D.C. for many years and took the train up here constantly, and just coming out into that 30th Street station just made me feel so happy. I came here for an odd reason. How many of you here remember the Cayenne Sea? Do you remember this? This is the ship that in 1986 loaded up all of your incinerator ash and sent it all around the world. What happened was that Philadelphia was burning its garbage in a municipal waste incinerator, which is a really, really dumb thing to do. I love Philadelphia, but that was really dumb. I'm sure it wasn't any of your decision. Anyway, that ash was piling up, and there was a gigantic pile of it. It was about 14,000 tons piled up next to the incinerator. They didn't know what to do with it. The ash from burning garbage is really toxic because it concentrates the heavy metals in the ash that was in the original garbage, and it also creates what's called products of incomplete combustion. It creates new toxic chemicals that weren't in the original garbage. So you've got this mound of toxic junk you got to get rid of, and there's no way to get rid of it. And so what Philadelphia did was hired this schmucky company who put it on a ship and started sailing around the world, lying to different countries about what it was. I actually contracted with Lloyd's of London to track the ship, and everywhere it was going, I warned them, the ship is coming. They will lie to you about what it is. It is toxic ash. Do not accept it. We tracked it for 27 months. That ship sailed around the world. It 3 times got a paint job and a new name. It went to every continent except Antarctica. At one point along the way, it went to Haiti, the most impoverished country in the hemisphere. And in Haiti, they said that it was fertilizer. And they got an import permit to unload fertilizer. And they unloaded 4,000 tons of this stuff on the beach. But I'm just curious, how many of you have heard of this before? That's so interesting. It was a big deal for a long time because the Haitians were outraged. They felt that this was really such a physical manifestation of the way that we had treated Haiti as a sort of symbolic rubbish bin for so long. So I was furious about this. I joined up with some groups in Haiti that asked for help, and then we joined up with these friends here. There was a number of Quaker organizations here who were equally outraged by it, and we launched a project called Project Return to Sender. And we worked for 13 years to get that ash home. And I have to say that the Philadelphians and the Friends groups in particular were so beautiful in how much they understood global justice and global solidarity. A lot of environmentalists are sort of scorned as being NIMBYs, not in my backyard. Like, if there's something bad, just keep it out of my backyard. We're trying to change that NIMBY to NOPE, which is not on planet Earth. If that ash is too dangerous for the children of Philadelphia, it is too dangerous for the children of Haiti. And so we did so many things over these 13 years. We testified in front of city councils. We protested. We marched in the streets. A group of Philadelphia friends went to Haiti. They went all the way to Haiti and had a protest with big signs saying, "We want our ash back. Bring our ash home." I mean, isn't that incredible? At one point, we dogged 3 successive mayors. At one point, when Ed Rendell was the mayor, we called up his office and said that we were a celebrity magazine and we would like his daily schedule. And for 2 weeks, they faxed us his daily schedule. And we had a huge banner that said, "Mayor Rendell, do the right thing, bring the ash home." And we were there at the airport when he was inaugurating the new direct Philly to Amsterdam KLM flight. We were there with our banner. We were there when he was at the museum at his black tie event. Everywhere he was, we were there with this sign, thanks to the Haitian community here, the Philadelphia Friends, and a number of student activists. And after 13 years, we did get the ash home. That was a big part of my life, was coming here for 13 years and complaining about this. So thank you, Philadelphia, for bringing that home. Okay. That is the sad part of the story, and that is why we did not rejoice, is that there is nothing you can do with this ash. There is no place that you can put it that is safely. My idea, which was not accepted, was to vitrify it into a statue. Vitrifying it is where you use enormous amounts of energy to solidify it into a glass-like structure so the toxics cannot leach. That's the only thing you can do with this. I said, make a sculpture to the monument of stupidity of burning garbage in an incinerator and to our vow to never do such a foolish thing again. And the mayor was like, no. So It ended up going to a landfill, which was a tough thing, and we actually went there and talked with the people about this in the that were going there. It's an imperfect solution. The press kept saying, well, where should it go? And I kept saying, if there was a place to deal with this safely, it wouldn't be such a problem. The fact that there's no place to put this safely indicates why we should not be burning our garbage. So even though it was bad for it to go to a landfill here, I believe it's better for it to go to a regulated landfill in the community that enjoyed the lifestyle benefits from making the garbage than in an open pile on the beach. Okay, so at this point now you have heard about me foregoing a trip to the Cuban beaches to go to the dump and spending 13 years of my life focused on a particular pile of incinerator ash. So I assume you might be thinking, like, who is this nut? And how did she get like this? So I just wanted to tell you quickly how I got so obsessed with garbage. For me, it started in college. I went to college in New York City. I had grown up in the Pacific Northwest, which was very clean and green in those days. And I went to college in New York City. I was stunned by the amount of garbage. I was just in New York a couple days ago. It's still like that. You walk down the street and there are piles of garbage like as high as your shoulders that just go on and on and on, these bags of garbage. As a college freshman, I was just mesmerized by the amount of garbage. And I kept thinking, where's all this stuff coming from? Where is it going? What is in it? That's where I picked up my hobby, which I still have to this day, to the embarrassment of my travel companions, as I open up garbage wherever I go to see what's in it. Because it's a really great way to find out what's going on in a society. Like the dump in Havana had almost no recyclables in there because they're not wasting there. It's very interesting. It's sort of going to a dump or looking in the garbage is like reading a society's secret journal. So I started looking in the garbage, and then I would wonder, every day as I'd go to school, I'd wonder what this is, and every day I'd come back from classes and it'd be gone. I was like, where is this stuff going? So I took a trip to the Fresh Kills landfill on Staten Island. Have any of you guys been to a landfill? Oh, that's so great. I really recommend it. I think it should be required before you get your first credit card. It's a fascinating thing to go to a landfill. So I stood there as a sophomore in college and looked at this dump where New York City sent its garbage. And if you imagine, as far as you can see in every direction is waste. There's furniture and food and appliances and clothes and books. It's massive. It's as far as you can see in every direction. It's the highest point on the eastern seaboard. Like, it's incredible how much waste it is. And I was brought up by a Depression-era mother who was not poor but was very conscientious about our stuff. We didn't waste, not because we knew about global ecological limits, because wasting was for losers. Like, who would waste? It just wasn't what we did. And so coming from that background of responsibility and stewardship and appreciation for our things, to look at this waste was stunning to me. And I just thought, what is going on? How is it that we have built an economy on such extreme levels of waste and that it is so much hidden from view? How could I go until I was 19 without knowing about this? So I became more obsessed. I ended up going down to Washington, D.C. and working for an environmental group, as Judy talked about, on the International Waste Trade Campaign, where I spent 10 years traveling around the world, tracking where our waste goes all over the world. And then I started investigating the factories that make the stuff. So I saw hundreds and hundreds of factories where we make our stuff and dumps where it's dumped. After I ended up living in Asia for 3 years, and finally I thought, I really need to come home. That so much of the problems were emanating from here in terms of the actual substances that we were dumping over there, but also in terms of this really toxic-laden, consumer-crazed way of organizing a society. We were now exporting that through media and things. I thought, I really need to come home. And originally when I came home, I thought that I would have to appeal to people's sense of global solidarity or, empathy with third world fisher folks who couldn't fish anymore. I thought I'd have to appeal to people's sense of responsibility about what's going on overseas to get them to care. And I was really surprised when I came home because I realized pretty quickly that we're paying a heavy price here, too, for this massive consumption. Not only are we trashing the planet and poisoning people overseas, but we're undermining our own public health. We're undermining our own economic security. We're undermining our own community well-being with this obsession with consumption. So I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to talk about this in a way that was an inviting way to talk about this. A lot of the information that environmentalists have out there is very gloomy and doomy and technical, and it's not that fun to join the conversation. I thought it's really not that complicated what's going on. As I see it, there are three main problems that we have. There's only three things we got to fix about our current systems of making, using, and throwing away stuff. Those three problems are: we are trashing the planet, we are trashing each other, and we're not even having fun. Now, that not even having fun part is really important here, because if this was fun, if the way that we were currently organizing our society and using our stuff was working for the majority of the world's people, we might want to have a different conversation. We might want to talk about how to prop up this inherently unsustainable system. Or, if it was really fun, if it was like a really good party, we might just say, let's go down in flames. At least it's a good ride. But increasingly, for people on both ends of the economic spectrum, it's not a good ride. So let's just try something different. Let me talk quickly about each one of those. One is that we are trashing the planet. One of the good things about how bad we're trashing it now is that people are increasingly understanding this, so we can sort of skip this part of the conversation. It's increasingly clear on so many levels that we are bumping up against the planet's limits. One of the best overall measures of this, I think, is the Global Footprint Network. They track how many resources we use each year compared to how much the planet produces. So right now, globally, we're using 1.5 planets worth of resources each year. And that's only possible because we're eating into the stockpiles that nature had eons and eons to accumulate. But you can't use 1.5 planets worth of resources indefinitely. I was giving a talk recently, and then some people in the audience started arguing, it's 1.3 planets. No, it's 1.6 planets. I said, you guys, it doesn't matter. Anything over 1 is a problem. And it's 1.5 and getting worse. They actually track the day each year by which we have used that year's worth of resources. It's called Global Overshoot Day. And each year it gets earlier and earlier. This year it was August 21st. So from August 21st on, which means today and tomorrow and until the end of the year, we are consuming beyond what the planet was able to produce this year. And that's a problem. One is because it's not sustainable, and two is because that means we're undermining the ecological systems that are going to produce for next year when we're going to have more people. So we really need to scale back. We're using too much stuff. We're trashing the planet. Then we're trashing each other. We're trashing each other in a couple of ways. One is with toxic chemicals, like we talked about in that film. Our systems, our factories that make all of the stuff that we bring into our homes and our schools and our workplaces and our churches and our foundation offices, all of that stuff is so loaded with toxic chemicals that every one of us now carries a level of toxic chemicals in our bodies. It's in our clothes, in our food, in our furniture. It's just so prevalent that there is no way to escape. There was a heartbreaking study done recently by the Environmental Working Group. It looked at the blood in newborn babies' umbilical cords. And with newborn babies, you can't blame it on lifestyle choices. Like, they're just born. They found an average of over 250 industrial and agricultural chemicals in the blood of newborn babies. So I feel like if we have reached a point in our society where the use of toxic chemicals is so prevalent that babies are being born pre-polluted, is that not time to draw a line in the sand and say, enough, get those toxic chemicals out of production? And one of the wonderful things about this problem, probably the only good thing about this problem, is it doesn't have to be this way. There are so many innovations in green chemistry, in biomimicry, in toxic use reduction, clean production. There are lots of examples of companies that have decided to get them out, that got them out. It's not that hard. So we really need to push those companies and say, get toxic chemicals out of our products. The second way that we're trashing people is on the equity front, is that while some of us are absolutely loaded with stuff, that we are really stuff saturated, we have too much stuff, other people don't have enough. How many times have you gotten a gift and the first thought you've had is, where am I going to put this? Like, my house is full. We are full. Yet other people don't have enough for even basic human survival. Half the world's population lives on less than $2 a day. And we've just reached the point for the first time in our global history that 1 billion people, that's 1 out of 6 people, are going to bed chronically hungry. That is just not acceptable. That's important to remember, because when we talk about we have to consume less, we have to remember for some people they have to consume more. Some people have to consume more just to meet a basic level of human health and dignity. So that means there's extra responsibility for us to sort of scale back our consumption to make room for others at the table. We're using too much stuff, we're using too toxic stuff, and we're not sharing it well. So let's talk quickly about the happiness piece. This happiness piece, I think, is so interesting because I thought it just doesn't make sense that all day we get these messages telling us that the way we will be happy is by getting all this new stuff. And we have really cool stuff. Like, we have cooler, faster, more multitaskier, better stuff than any previous generation could even imagine. Yet our happiness levels are declining. So there was a disconnect. So I started doing a bunch of research into happiness studies, and it is so fascinating. I think this sort of validates what we all know in our heart, but it goes such against what the mainstream messages are that it still seems counterintuitive. It turns out that what actually makes people happy is not stuff. Once you have a basic level of stuff, once you have a roof over your head and food, once your basic needs are met, study after study shows that across income groups, across ethnicities, across age groups, across cultures, it's very consistent what actually makes people happy. It's the quality of our social relations. It's time with friends and family. It's a sense of meaning or a sense of purpose in your life beyond yourself. And it's the act of coming together with others towards shared goals. Yet we are in this crazy situation where we are working and watching and spending so much that we're undermining and neglecting those very things that can make us happy. We work longer hours than any other industrialized country except maybe South Korea, depending on which data you look at. We work on average about 300 hours a year longer than our counterparts in Europe. We spend more time shopping and watching TV than people in any other country. The average in the U.S. now is 5 hours a day watching television. Isn't that stunning? So the result is we have more stuff, but we have fewer friends. You know, and what good is a brand new, beautiful Pottery Barn table if you don't have a whole gang of friends and neighbors to cram around it for dinner? But the data about how many friends we have, it's shocking. There's a new study that looked over the last 30 years. People in the United States went from an average of having 3 friends to less than 1. 25% in this country say they do not have one person with whom to talk about personal issues. Can you imagine not having one friend to talk about? So then what we do is we go shopping to try to fill that void, but it's a mismatch between what really would work and what we're doing. So there is a fourth thing to know about all of our stuff. Besides we're trashing the planet, we're trashing each other, and we're not even having fun. The fourth thing to know is it doesn't have to be this way. And people often ask me, how do I stay so optimistic and cheery in spite of having visited these factories and dumps all over the world? And the reason is it doesn't have to be this way. This problem is not intractable. If it was, it'd be hard to get out of bed in the morning. Solutions abound on the technical front, on the social front, on the political front. There are so many ways that we could do things better, and there are so many ways to get involved. You know, one of the good things about such an all-pervasive problem is that there are so many solutions and so many ways to engage, so you don't even have to do something boring. You can do something fun, and it still will help. Often when I travel and give talks, people are skeptical that there really are so many solutions. So I just like to throw out a random one as an example to show you there really are. One of the things I've been looking at a lot lately is biomimicry. Biomimicry is the science of learning from nature. The idea is that humans are trying to figure out a bunch of design challenges. Nature has had eons to figure out these design challenges. Let's look at what they do, what nature does. So, for example, we have not been able to figure out how to create an underwater glue that is not toxic, but barnacles can. You know, what can we learn from them? Or my current favorite, because I love black, is black dye is very toxic. And so if you have black upholstery, the factories that make this stuff releases a lot of toxic chemicals. And people have been studying this, trying to figure out how to reduce the toxic chemicals. So some biomimicry scientists looked at the peacock. They said, well, how does the peacock make black? You know, nature doesn't make stuff toxic just by accident. So how does the peacock make black? It turns out the black in a peacock is not a pigment. It's the illusion of black based on the way the molecules are attached to each other so that we see black even though it's not there. So now a bunch of furniture upholstery guys are copying that and making black furniture that has no toxic dye, and it doesn't fade in the sunlight because it's not actually black. It just looks black. You know, that's just one of an infinite number of solutions that are just out there waiting to be grappled with or waiting to be grabbed and run with. Since most of you guys in this room are funders, I wanted to talk specifically about what some funders can do to address some of these problems. I've spent 20 years looking at this movement for sustainable production and consumption and trying to figure out what's needed. Where do we need more support and advocacy? And my previous job actually was coordinating a funders work group on this issue. It's a great work group. If any of you are interested in looking at systems of production and consumption, which is a fancy way for saying how we make, use, and throw away stuff, if any of you are interested in improving how we make, use, and throw away stuff, please talk to me or Michael. Michael, can you stand up? He's my Story of Stuff partner back there. Afterwards, and we'll tell you about this Funders Affinity Group, which is a national group with members all over the country who get together and strategize and learn and share information about how to improve how we make, use, and throw away stuff. So when I worked with them, they asked me to really think hard about where some of the gaps were in the movement so that they could fund more strategically. And I want to share 3 observations that I have and what the funding implications were. 3 observations that I really think are key places where we could make this movement better. So one of the first observations about the work going on right now, and there's fabulous work going on this. There are people working on clean production and toxic use reduction and conscious consuming, and there's all along the materials economy there are people doing really, really good work. But there's some gaps. And this is one of the gaps. If you look at all these groups that are doing excellent work, there is much more work and much more effective work being done on the quality of what we consume rather than the quantity. So think about that. That means there's a lot of groups out there saying, buy non-toxic shampoo, buy PVC-free baby toys, buy BPA-free drinkable waters, buy fair trade, buy recycled, buy local. A lot of stuff about buy better, buy this instead of this. And that's all good because it's slowly shifting the market towards the more sustainable, more fair products. But there's much less work going on about buy less. You know, maybe in a lot of choices, maybe the best thing to do is not to figure out the less toxic thing to buy, but to borrow it from your neighbor. Or like where I live, our public library system has a tool lending library. So I can go with my library card and get a jackhammer or a wheelbarrow or a stud finder or whatever it is that I need for free. You know, maybe the solution is that kind of stuff rather than a fair trade or FSC certified wood hammer. Maybe it's more commons and more sharing. We need to figure out a way to turn up the volume on the conversation, not just about the quality of what we consume, but the quantity. How can we consume less? I think there's a lot of reasons why groups have focused on the quality of what we consume rather than the quantity. We can talk more about that in the Q&A if you're interested. You know, it's a lot safer to say buy this lipstick instead of this lipstick rather than why are there neurotoxins in our lipstick to begin with. You know, it's a lot safer. It appeals more to consumer self-interest. It doesn't really get to the tough issues about how our growth-obsessed economy is unsustainable, so it doesn't really sort of avoids that whole issue to just say buy this instead of this. So one of the things that we as funders can do is look for new voices talking about the quantity of what we consume. Also, if I talk to a bunch of the groups who work on the quality of what we consume, like groups that are encouraging less toxic products or FSC certified paper, things like that. I ask them, why aren't you working on the quantity of what we consume? And they say, we know we have to, but we haven't gotten that there. That the wins on the quality of what we consume are so much easier and more imminent, so they're doing that, but they know that's out there. So we need to support those groups because they have the credibility in those fields. Like the Environmental Paper Network has the credibility in the paper sector. You know, the Campaign for Clean Cosmetics has that credibility in the cosmetic sector. Find these known, trusted, credible groups that are working on improving the quality of our stuff and support them to add to their agenda working on the quantity of our stuff. Because if we have non-toxic cell phones that break in 6 months, we still haven't solved the problem. And if we all become experts in learning how to navigate the cosmetics aisle so we know how to buy better shampoo, but the people next to us who haven't studied all those databases don't have that option, we still haven't solved the problem. So we really need to look at the quantity of what we consume as much as the quality. That's a big gap in our movement right now. There's not a culturally accessible way to talk about consuming less. Too often, if you talk about consuming less, they think you want everyone to live in a yurt and wear sandals and eat veggie burgers. We need to find a culturally relevant, accessible way to talk about how much we consume in this country. The second thing that I've noticed about the movement is that we have very good, solid scientific data about how we are bumping up against the planet's limits and a lot of data and scientific information about solutions of how we could do things better. But somehow we're not getting that information out. At this point, I feel that we need to invest more in communications rather than more research. At this point, we have offices and offices full of solid scientific technical reports on what's wrong and how we can do that better. We are not lacking in data on the problem or lacking in ideas for a solution. We're lacking in our ability to communicate with regular people in a way that is inviting and relevant to them in their lives. Too often, environmental stuff is still considered this sort of external thing to other issues, and it's wonky, and environmentalists are grim and determined and not that fun to hang out with generally. And if you go hang out with them, you think you're going to get scolded because you forgot your canteen and you didn't carry your own bag, and it's just we don't have a good rap to relate to regular people at this point. And so one of the places that I think would be really strategic to invest in for your grantees that are working on environmental stuff is around more communications. We're really good at talking to other people who already care. We're not that good at talking to the people on the street and relating our concerns to the issues they care about. And I believe we have common ground with almost everyone out there. If you look at the public and you look at the data about how people feel about the environment, there's a tiny, tiny sector of the unreachables over there. I just feel like forget them. The vast majority of the society, even if they're not active in environmental issues, even if they don't identify as environmentalists, they don't want their babies to be born pre-polluted. They want their kids to have good schools. They want some climate stability. They want the same things we have, but we have been unable to communicate our issues in a way that makes meaningful connections. So we need to invest in new messengers, new ways of communication, using more social media, short-form videos instead of long, wonky technical papers. Using Facebook is an amazing organizing potential. I mean, you can ask your kids if you guys don't do it yourself. Like, that's where I learned a lot of this, is from my kid. Like, that is how people communicate now. In our recent films, almost 50% of the viewers have come via Facebook. It is so crazy for us to not be on these social medias where the majority of people are increasingly getting their information and using them to craft relevant, popular education. So we need a lot more training and investment in communications, media, platforms to get this out. My third observation, and this is the one that worries me. I tend to be very optimistic, but this is the one piece that I'm a bit worried about. My third observation is that we as a society are forgetting how to come together to make collective change. And I see this as I travel around the country, and I've been on this massive speaking tour. I've been going all over the country, to like in the middle of the country, to both coasts, everywhere. And when I show the film The Story of Stuff, which lays out a very broad systemic critique of what is wrong with how we make and use and throw away stuff, it's like a big problem statement there. I show that to people. I cannot tell you how many times someone raises their hand and says, "What can I buy differently to solve this problem?" Or they ask me, "What can I do?" after I've laid out the fact that 1/6 of the people on the planet are starving, that our oceans are having dead zones all over them and we're going to be out of fish in 30 years, that our entire climate is in chaos. These are like big problems, that inequity is growing. We have a 15% unemployment rate where I live. Like, these are big problems. And when people say, "What can I do?" I like to see how they're thinking. So I ask people, "What can you think of doing?" So this is what I get back really consistently. I can ride my bike. I can change my light bulb. I can carry my own bag. I can recycle. I can buy fair trade. It's all I, and mostly buy. And while those things are all very, very good, and of course we should do all those things, of course we should do those things, they are not commensurate with the scale of the problem. If we all do all those things, it is not going to be enough to bring about the level of change that we needed. And so I've started to realize when I talk to people and try to push and see why are they not coming up with joining campaigns and doing collective action, I've come to realize that we all have two different parts of ourselves. We have a consumer part of ourselves, and we have a citizen part of ourselves. And that consumer part of ourself is spoken to and validated and nurtured from day one. And if you have a kid, you know it is from day one in this country. We are primarily related to throughout the day as a consumer. So much that if you read the paper, the word consumer and person are used interchangeably. That's our primary identity. That's where we hang out most of the time. So that consumer part has become overdeveloped, and the citizen part has atrophied. And so the result is when we are faced with these enormous problems, the best that we can do is think of shopping better, or these individual actions. And I understand why, because we're good at being consumers. Like, we all could get online right now, find any product in the world, get it delivered to our door in 48 hours. Like, we know how to do that. And so it's comfortable to be there because we know how to do that. And it's not so comfortable to move back to our citizen self because we haven't used that muscle for a while. And so what I'm saying is we need to start moving back to that citizen self. Still, buy non-toxic and all that. Still make responsible choices when you're being your consumer self. But remember that is not where your real power lay. Because our real power is not in making better choices at the grocery store. Our real power is in coming together with other people to build a base of power to get this country back on track, to get us oriented towards sustainability and justice. And that comes from being an engaged member in civil society. Now, too often I see environmental groups all over the countries that have great campaigns, but they're often relating to people as consumers. They're not including a re-engage the citizen muscle part of their strategy. And I think it's enormously important that we do that we re-engage our citizen muscle, partly because that's how we'll build the power to get this country back on track, but partly, remember back to what I said about what makes us happy? Think back to those. It's the quality of your social relationships. It's a sense of meaning and purpose in your life beyond yourself. It's the act of coming together with others toward shared goals. So one of the great things about re-engaging that citizen muscle, re-engaging with your community and society to make the world better, is it provides those things that makes us most happy. Like, how fortuitous is that? That we're not saying, come join the activist movement to make the world a better place, and we'll be naggy and whiny and think we're better than others because we have Priuses. It's not about that. It's about come over here and have a more meaningful life, find rich, wonderful new friendships, and together we will make the world a better place and have much more fun in the meantime. So that's really important. If we can get people to move back into the citizen cells. Start stretching that muscle. Start tasting how rich life is when you have a sense of meaning and you're working together with others toward shared goals. Then I really think we can start to build the power to get this country back on track. So as funders, one of the things that I would like to suggest is that regardless of what issue you fund, it does not have to be all environmental. One of the screens to think about in evaluating grants is this engaging people as their citizen self? Is it rebuilding an active participatory democracy? Is it teaching young people what democracy even means? Too often people think, I recycle, I vote. That's all I need to do in life, right? You've got it all covered. You know, voting is the lowest common denominator. Really engaging our democracy is all the stuff you do in between the votes, which will then lead us to have more meaningful choices when we do go to the ballot box. So that's a really strategic leverage point for funders, is to think about ways that we can reengage the citizen muscle. Michael and I and the rest of our team at the Store of Stuff Project think about this stuff all day. We're in touch with lots of organizations that are working on these issues locally, nationally, internationally. If any of you have any questions about particular organizations or particular issues, we would be happy to talk to you afterwards. And we're going to open this up now to questions and answers. And thank you guys so much for listening so intently. When we have questions and answers, if you could just tell me who you are.
Buy better, buy less. Is someone working on making things last longer?
Hardly anybody. There's a lot more on the make it safe part than the make it last part. And the reason is because it's easier to say make it safe. You know, Apple just wants you to buy a new iPod every year. They don't have an inherent need to have it contain neurotoxins in it. So they're willing to take the neurotoxins out if you keep buying one every single year. So there's a lot less work on the making it durable. There is some stuff that's happening on that, especially around electronics. One of the things that groups are working on is getting them to be designed modular, so you can just replace one part, and also having what we call product take back. The idea is that if a company had to take something back, they would have more incentive for it to be longer lasting. Or the best example is Interface Carpet. They have come up with a really innovative model. Do you know how when you offices have a Xerox machine, you don't actually need to own the Xerox machine, you lease it? What if we could do that with all our products? So what Ray Anderson, the CEO of Interface Carpet, realized is that this kind of carpet, people don't have a need to own that kind of carpet. They have a need for the service that the carpet provides. So he's come up with this idea to lease the carpets. Now, if a business leases you the product, it's in their interest to make it long-lasting, not require maintenance, because then they'd have to come out and fix it, make it very durable, because they get their money from making it last. In the current retail model, they get their money from making it not last. And so imagine if Target leased you the DVD player and you were paying a certain fee each month. It would behoove them to have it last and for them to not see you for a long time and just pay your monthly thing. So there's some people working on that kind of paradigm shift, but much less on durability. There's a company called, it's either Blue Green or Green Blue, I get them mixed up, Bill McDonough's organization that works with companies to make more durable stuff. There's also Clean Production Action does it, but it's still much less than the quality issues. It's a huge need where huge funding opportunity.
One more question. Can you like this? Okay. So, can you think of a campaign that has exercised the citizen muscle? I mean, I think of the Obama campaign. You know, regardless of your political stripe, it engaged a lot of people.
Oh, I think there's lots of campaigns. I think that the citizen muscle piece, one reason that it fell out of fashion was during the Bush years, a lot of environmentalists realized they thought there is no way we're going to get anything through Congress right now, so let's just forget the whole democracy piece and work in the markets. And I understand why they did that, because they got some real wins. They said, let's get Staples to use only FSC certified paper, or let's get Victoria's Secret to use only recycled. There was a big campaign about that, where activists wearing lingerie and carrying chainsaws protested in front of Victoria's Secrets all over the country and stuff like that. There's a lot of campaigns like that engaged they wanted to make change in the markets. And the truth is, they made some really good change there. But we neglected the democracy part the whole time. And so one mistake we made was by thinking we can't get anything through national Congress, we also just sort of forgot about state and local governments too. Democracy is not only in Washington, D.C. Democracy is in our communities. So there's a lot of other opportunities. But there's lots of campaigns that involve a community building piece. We're working right now with Public Citizen around this issue of the Citizens United Supreme Court case. Do you know about this? Where the Supreme Court said that corporations get the protection of constitutional amendment of protection of freedom of speech, and so they're allowed to spend unlimited to influence elections. That's what our next film is about after the electronics one. We're filming it on Thursday with Public Citizen. And it's a perfect example of, they're not just saying, sign this petition. They're organizing a whole campaign where they want people to show the film in their house, invite people over to talk about this issue, collect signatures, make local campaigns, engage people on the ground, not just over the internet and not just by signing a check. But there's many, many organizations that do have a piece of that. Anything that's getting people to actually talk to each other, that's getting people to actually try to change policy, not just buy differently, is all really helpful.
Hi, Kate Houston from the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia. So we have an ongoing research project, and obviously our business is our interest, right? So we want to see businesses succeed in Greater Philadelphia. And it's called the Emerging Industries Project, and we've basically looked industry by industry, asking businesses to come to the table and to ask them questions that help our environmental partners and our economic development partners and our workforce development partners make better decisions for serving the business community and vice versa. One of the ones we studied was on, and we're actually looking at doing one, a supply chain analysis on the textile industry in Greater Philadelphia, which we're excited about. If anybody else in here is excited about it, let me know. We did one on construction and demolition waste recovery. And so the big sort of takeaway from that was that we would really need a legislative decision to basically force business or property owners, when they demolish their buildings or build new, to recycle the materials. And there's some easy ways to do that and some complex ways to do that, but it was very exciting. What we heard from the small business community, SBEnds members, was that if you pass legislation like this, the big guys will come in and start doing that work, like the Waste Managements of the world, and we will lose our, little composting business or our little material recycling business. So how do you support the local business owner and move the big sort of corporate monsters and not lose one in the process?
I think one of the key things is talking to the small businesses so that we understand their needs. Because if we ourselves are not small businesses, we can't really understand what the day-to-day challenges and obstacles are. And it is so key to talk to them and make sure that whatever legislative approach we come up with works for them. And there's such a variety of ways to do that. I'll come back to that. First, I want to say I'm so glad you're talking about legislation. So often we are still trying to solve these problems one at a time, and there's not enough time. We are really butting up against the planet's limits. There is a role for government in this. One of the pushbacks I've gotten from the Story of Stuff film is where I talked about there being a role for government, and I've got all these right-wing people writing in and saying, government should get out of here. No, there is a role for government. The reason we have government is to solve big, complex problems that we cannot solve as individuals, and a lot of these we just cannot solve as individuals. One of the analogies I use is, imagine if when people were fighting slavery, their strategy was to go slave owner by slave owner and say, excuse me, sir, please don't have slaves because it's really not good for people. And no, that we would still be having slaves if that was the approach. The approach was outlaw slavery, and that's what we need to do, is outlaw the use of these toxic chemicals, outlaw outrageously wasteful things. We need different laws. We need to make sure that they work in a way that supports the good guys. One of the strategies I believe in is government subsidies. Right now, if you look at where our government subsidies are going, which is our taxpayer money, our government subsidies are disproportionately going to prop up the dirty economy of yesterday. Enormous subsidies to fossil fuel, to coal, to nukes, to war. Enormous subsidies to all these things that are not helpful, that are propping up the obsolete, dirty, unjust economy of yesterday. So when people say there's not enough money for a real solution, you say, yes, there is actually. It's over there. Let's take that money out of there and put it over here. If we could divert some, but really all of that money, we would have enough money to support small-scale businesses. We would have enough money to have excellent public schools, no matter how rich your community is. We would have enough money for clean, safe energy. We'd have enough money that everybody could go to the doctor without paying. We'd have enough money for every single thing we want. So if you butt up against that obstacle of there's not enough money, say, yes, there is. It's going to the coal industry and BP and nukes and war, and we would like it over here, please. That's what our next film is, after the Citizens United one. But it's really great that you're doing that work. Yes, in the front.
Your comment about citizenry and how it comes together. I just read. Oh, thank you. I just read an article about the way in which wonderfulness of people helping with cancer research, and I'm a cancer survivor, and I admire all the people who walk and raise funds and so on. But the fact is that they're looking at all the money going for research. Why don't we get after the toxics that are causing this? Why don't we look at what's happening to people who are being infected in the first place, rather than lopping on wonderful campaigns which make people feel good? It is marvelous. I do appreciate the pink ribbons and so on. It's very helpful to bring it in forward, but it's not really attacking the problem.
Thank you very much. I agree 100%. We looked at that issue in our story of cosmetics. I'm all for Race for the Cure and all that. I'd much rather see Race for Prevention. Now, if you look at the companies that are supporting the Race for the Cure and a lot of this pink ribbon stuff, a lot of them, if you look at the list, a whole bunch of them are companies which use, every single day in all their products, use chemicals that cause cancer. And so they have a real investment in having us focus on the cure, because that doesn't bring up the prevention issue. One organization that's done a lot of research on this and really focuses on prevention is Breast Cancer Fund. I really recommend them. They are fabulous out in San Francisco, and they have a whole campaign that's very critical of the pink ribbon because it is diverting attention from prevention. And a number of these chemical companies got together with some of the sort of mainstream cancer groups, and they made this report a couple of years ago that just made me sick. The cover was a young African-American girl, and the title said, Cancer, Prevention Starts With You, implying it's this young African-American girl. I said, no, prevention starts with Monsanto and Dow and DuPont. That is where prevention starts. How are we as individuals supposed to prevent ourselves when our entire industrial economy is laced with these chemicals? I'll tell you, I'm a living example of the futility of trying the prevention starts with me approach. I am super uptight about toxic chemicals. I really know a lot about them. I'm really vigilant. I screen everything coming into my house. There is no BPA, no BFRs, no PVC. There are no Teflon frying pans. There are no Scotch Guard waterproof. I mean, my daughter, even as stuff comes in, she goes, I think it's PVC, Mom. We're like, get it out. You know, we're like uptight. I have like my organic vegetables from my CSA. I buy used furniture, so it's off-guest in someone else's house. I am like on the case. You know, I would not wish my level of uptightness upon any of you. And last year I had my body burden tested to see what toxic chemicals I'm carrying. I have hundreds of toxic chemicals in my body. Even with that level of vigilance, I have toxic chemicals that were banned when I was a toddler in my body. I have toxic chemicals that I never knowingly ingested or applied onto my skin. I have toxic chemicals that I never gave permission to any company to put inside me, but they're inside me, hundreds of them. I'm slightly lower level than the average American, but I'm still loaded with them. It is impossible to prevent cancer on an individual basis. What we have to do is get carcinogens out of our industrial production system. Carcinogens have become so normalized. There was an article in a business magazine recently about what day of the week should your CEO announce that he has cancer to least affect stock prices? I'm like, that is so sick. It's just, you know, we've gotten so used to it and normalized it. We all know people with cancer. It's just become a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be. So we have to really focus on all these issues, on the prevention and the cure as well, of course, but it's really about preventing. That's where the real leverage is. Any other questions?
Here, Susan Siegel, Lincoln Financial. On a lighter note, I'm sure you've seen this, but maybe some of you haven't. George Carlin has a fabulous piece on stuff. So if couple with your website, send anyone a YouTube George Carlin stuff, and you will just say stop, stop the consumption. What am I thinking? It's a fabulous 5-minute piece, and I highly recommend it.
Yes.
First, a comment. You talked about leasing things. Do you remember the phones when you leased them from AT&T? They lasted for 40 years.
My mom still got it.
I still have a couple. In your piece with Stephen Colbert, you talked about reverence, which is a subject dear to my heart. And are you using that language, and how is that communicating to people?
I do use that language because I do feel a real sense of reverence for the stuff that I have. And it partly comes from growing up in a family where there wasn't a lot of superfluous consumption, so I knew this was like my pair of shoes for 3rd grade. That's it, you know, take care of them. So partly it was a practical thing. But also it's because I have visited hundreds of factories where our stuff is made and dumps where our stuff is dumped. And I've interviewed women who've had children with birth defects because they worked in semiconductor factories in India, or a huge variety of environmental and health and social costs that I've seen up front and talked to the people directly involved. So I cannot now pick up a cell phone or look at really anything without some part of my mind and my heart thinking about who paid what price for me to have this thing. And I don't take that lightly, because those are real people and real environments. So I have an enormous amount of reverence. I think this is an important message. Some people have said that I'm anti-consumption, and we got some snarky emails that said, if you're against consumption, where'd you get that shirt you're wearing? I'm like, ugh. And so what I say is, I'm not anti-stuff, I'm pro-stuff. I want people to appreciate and take care of their stuff more. And part of that has to come from the manufacturer side to make the stuff more durable. And part of it comes from our side. You bring your bike in from the rain. Get your shoes resoled. Don't upgrade. I'm always telling everyone, resist the upgrade. Don't upgrade until you really need to. Have a little more reverence. When I made the film, talking to faith-based communities was not even on my radar screen. I was really making the film for other people working on different social causes to get people to see how interconnected all of our issues were. I wanted people in our world to move from being recycling activists and worker health and safety activists and forest activists to seeing how there's so many interconnections so that we could be a more unified whole movement. I wasn't even thinking about faith-based communities, and we were inundated by requests for more information from faith-based communities. It's amazing. We get these wonderful letters from nuns. We get pictures of the film being shown in churches with people sitting in pews watching it. All these people asking for more information. So I was not raised in a strong faith base, so I didn't really know how to reframe the information I had for faith communities. So we looked for partners that had that experience and also the connections already with faith-based communities. I found this wonderful group called Green Faith in New Jersey, and they work with interdenominational, which is one of our criteria, interdenominational faith-based communities to get people to think more about environmental issues. And we worked with them, and we made this fabulous set of curriculums for youth groups in different churches. We've done a Christian one and a Jewish one. We're working right now on a Muslim one and a sort of spiritual but non-denominational one. And they're all available free on our website. And what they are guided 6-week programs where you bring together young people and you examine our relationship with stuff, with sustainability, with each other, with community, with the environment, through the lens of your faith. And they've been enormously successful. They're being used all over the country. Actually, just 2 weeks ago, we got a spike in attention because Glenn Beck held them up as an example of evil to be avoided. And he actually smelled it. This is a really excellent Christian youth-based curriculum. He smelled it and said it smelled like sulfur. Isn't that outrageous? So one of the other things I like to tell people, funders and advocates both, that we need to do in the society, no matter what we're doing, is push the boundaries of acceptable discourse in this country. The spectrum of what we can talk about politically in this country is shrinking so much that if we say we should share, they say you're a socialist. If we say government has a role in making sure our children's toys don't have lead paint, they're like, you're a communist. It's like the boundaries of acceptable political discourse are shrinking. So much that they say if your church promotes social justice, leave your church. I mean, that's nuts. So whatever else we're doing, we need to also push the boundaries so that this is a country in which we can talk about how to promote social justice and environmental sustainability without being marginalized or actually threatened.
Given our election results on Tuesday, now California did okay, but the rest of us, and the ongoing serious, obviously very serious economic situation, does your message, your activities, what advice, because, the don't buy, and this is just a problem with economic theory today, if you don't buy, you don't create jobs, you don't have demand, how do you position?
Well, right now our economy is disproportionately focused on consumption. It's about 70% of our economic activity right now is about consumption. It wasn't always like that. It used to be a much more equal balance with a lot more production, and we'd like to see it shift back. One of my colleagues, Van Jones, says the only thing we know how to produce in this country anymore is a latte. And we need to shift it back and bring more production back home here. More local, healthy, safe, sustainable production locally. That would be better for the economy. It'd be better for the planet. It'd be better for jobs. We definitely need to rebuild our productive base here, especially with local small businesses. So when people say, but if we don't shop, the economy will collapse, I think we need to ask deeper questions. We need to ask, well, why is our economy so consumption-based? And is it healthy that the average family in the United States now has $8,000 of credit card debt? There is just no way that maintaining this obsessive consumption is healthy for the planet, for our national economy, or for us personally. A lot of these issues are tough to figure out. What would a new economy look like? There's a group that Michael and I have both been involved with called the New Economy Network that we're really excited about. I recommend you check them out on the web. There are a bunch of thinkers on all different aspects of this. We have economists and job experts and messaging experts and environmentalists and all different folks, energy folks, transportation folks, that are getting together to talk about what would a new economy look like. I mean, how would we deal with things like energy, with transportation? Some people are saying, could we work fewer hours? If you look at Europe and the United States took very different paths in terms of our relationship to work. After the Industrial Revolution, when we had such huge gains in productivity, Europe decided to trade a lot of those gains in productivity for more leisure time. So they have their month-long vacations, and in France they work 35 hours a week, and they have more socialized things like healthcare and education. In the United States, we took a different path. We decided to trade those gains in productivity for more stuff. So we have bigger houses, bigger cars, bigger fridges, bigger TVs, bigger everything, but we're exhausted. So maybe it's at a time now when we are stuff saturated that we could re-examine our whole economy and say, is there a way that we could trade those gains in productivity for more leisure, for better schools, for better healthcare, for more things that actually benefit society than just endless stuff? We're at a really right moment to rethink some of our basic assumptions about the economy, and the New Economy Network is a great venue for exploring those with other people thinking about this.
I'm glad Debbie asked that question. I'm Erica Orslak from St. Christopher's Foundation for Children here in Philadelphia. And I was going to say, I think our measures, I'm thinking about the measures that we use to define how great this country is, are screwed up. And so piggybacking on what she asked, are there other places that measure things differently, not GDP, not the Dow Industrial numbers? I mean, are there other opportunities out there for us to measure it differently?
Okay, so that is really right to the point of what we need to do differently, because we pay attention to what we measure. And in my Story of Stuff book, which I think there's a couple copies floating around, I have an appendix of a list of a lot of examples of policies that we could use to make the world better. But I have 4 big picture changes that would really have transformative potential to get our country back on track environmentally and socially. And the number one thing I say is we need a different metric. So right now we are using GDP as our sole metric of how well we're doing. And GDP is a measure of how much money changes hands, which is generally associated with also how many resources are pulled out of the earth, consumed, and then thrown away. So there's a close link with environmental impact with GDP. In some areas it's decoupling those a little bit, but still it's very close. And so the problem is with GDP is it doesn't distinguish between economic activity that makes the world better and economic activity which makes the world worse. So the BP oil spill was excellent for the GDP. Every new prison built, excellent for the GDP. A garbage incinerator, a car crash, a case of cancer, all of those things, excellent for the GDP. So those are all treated as positives in our society. Whereas something like a neighbor who's sick and you take that person chicken noodle soup doesn't show up on the GDP. Like a strong community where you share things, our tool lending library in our community, which is great. We love our tool lending library. That's a negative on the GDP because we're not each buying a new hammer every time we need to put a nail in. So we need a different metric, and there's a lot of different approaches to it. One is the genuine progress indicator, which still looks at economic activity, but it also looks at stuff like how healthy are the children, what's the literacy rate, what's the obesity rate, how clean is the water. It's really interesting if you look at GDP and GPI. As GDP goes up, for a long time GPI goes up too, because for a long time economic development does help you. You know, when you have sanitation and all these central heating and refrigerators and all, that's all good. But then after a point, it starts to go like this. And that's where we are now, where a big proportion of our increases to the GDP is actually undermining our overall well-being. Another rating that I find very interesting is the Happy Planet Index. This is done by the New Economics Foundation in London. And it's not just how happy we are, because if you looked at how happy countries were absent the context, it's sort of theoretical. What the Happy Planet Index does is it looks at how happy people are, which is calculated by your life expectancy times your life satisfaction over what your footprint is, how many resources you use. So it's basically a measure of how efficient a country is at converting its natural resources into well-being. And they do this study every year, and they release a study called Does a Good Life Have to Cost the Earth? And it's on the New Economics Foundation website. It's so interesting. So last year, the Happy Planet Index had 140 countries, I think. The United States was 114th. That means that all those countries above us, which was, of course, all of Scandinavia, but also all of Asia, all of Latin America, most of the Middle East, pretty much all of Europe, of course, pretty much everybody except for Africa did better than the United States at converting natural resources into human well-being. Last year, the number one country was Costa Rica, which has a longer life expectancy than us, a higher level of life satisfaction than us, and uses a quarter the resources per person. I always like to point out to people that Costa Rica did abolish its military and converted all those resources into social goods, which would buy us a lot of well-being if we were to follow suit. But I think that's a really interesting thing because it looks at well-being and ecological footprint. And that's one of the things that surprises me about how we've gotten some pushback from people about my message, where some people say, you're anti-American. I say, actually, I think I'm pro-American because I'm saying we can do stuff better. If I said this is the best we can be, woohoo, 114th, we rock, that would be betraying this country. I think we can do a whole lot better. And the best way we're going to do it is by re-engaging in an active democracy to turn this country back around towards sustainability and justice.
Hello, my name is Mike Lee, and I'm with Impact Philadelphia, and I'm new to the grant-giving business, and I just have a question of kind of vetting our own organization and where our money comes from, because we are also consumers as a granting organization or institution. So what would you do in a situation where one of your largest donors is participating negatively in this consumption process? And how can you impact what they're doing as at the donor level and also promote the cause you're trying to advocate for as the grantor capacity?
That's a question that environmental groups grapple with all the time because we're always getting offers from money from these big companies, and it's a tough issue. Let me say what about the word consumers. I'm not against consumption. Like, we all need clothes and food, and I'm not against consumption. What I'm against is consumerism. And consumerism is a particular relationship to consumption through which we try to establish our social status and sense of purpose and sense of meaning by owning stuff. So I don't think we should all say we're never going to buy a new shirt. What we should say is we want to not buy too much because we're using too much stuff. We want that shirt to be safe for the workers, safe for the environment, safe for us. We're using too much stuff, we're using too toxic stuff, and we're not sharing it well. Within that realm, it's okay to buy stuff. It's not about never ever being consumers. In terms of your specific situation, I think I would look hard at who that donor is and what their central mode of business is. And is that economic activity, is that business activity something which could be transformed to be better? Because a lot of businesses could be transformed to be better. Or is it something that is so inherently part of the problem that it's just not recoverable? And then you have to decide, where is your point of leverage? Is your point of leverage to say, we'll continue to accept your money if you will work with us to improve your situation? Because your accepting their money is providing some validity. By them being associated with you makes them look better. It eases their guilt. It's good PR. They get to say, we do charity, all that stuff. So in exchange for the benefit that you're providing them, the PR benefit and the guilt-assuaging benefit that you're providing them, can you leverage that to get them excited and interested or force them into being more sustainable? If not, then you have to decide, is it worth it? And you can justify it because you're able to do so much good with the money that it's worth, giving a little bit of green to this business. Or would you be more effective to say, no, we won't participate and leave as a way to motivate them to realize they need to change? We go through this all the time. Like when we made this story of bottled water, we got letters from every single reusable canteen company out there saying, we'd like to give you a check. Would you please, we'll give you all free bottles. Would you like to use it every time you're on television? All these kinds of things. And we decided, no, we wouldn't take their money, even though we love Clean Canteen and these guys. We decided we wouldn't take them because we felt that it would open us up to being, having our credibility questioned. So for us, the absolute purity and integrity of our message, we decided not to take money from them, which is tough, because it costs money to make these things. You just need to make that decision. Is your ability to leverage them, to change them, and your ability to do good in the world enhanced or undermined by your relationship with them? I don't know if that's helpful. It's if you want to talk more afterwards, I can give you more specifics. It's a tough call.
Hi, Maylee. From the Clinial Foundation, and thanks for coming. I want to go back to more to your advice for Grantmakers. That when I think of the Grantmakers in the Philadelphia area, we probably have a couple larger foundations, but most of us are small foundations, make small grants, and probably feel very stretched at this moment because most of us probably have 30% less than we did 2 years ago. So in learning about this, and given that we feel so stretched already and have limited resources, what advice do you have for those of us who are small foundations?
Okay, a few things. One is, if you don't fund environment right now, you don't need to start a whole environment program. There's lots of ways that you can encourage an environmental sensibility into whatever it is whatever programs that you're doing. Such as asking your grantees, are you using recycled paper? Do you compost? Just begin to cultivate that kind of awareness. Another place where there's really good value added is with collaborations. That's where you can really leverage your money on top of what others have done. So, for example, we come out of the environmental community, and these churches wanted to meet with us. Rather than us start a whole church program, by collaborating with us with the churches, we're able to provide them a wealth of information on environmental issues. They're able to provide us access to an entree to this whole faith-based community that we didn't come to the table with connections to. So collaborations can often take small amounts of money and have huge impact because you magnify whatever it is you're doing with different groups, especially when it comes to breaking down silos. I think that's a really strategic place to look for collaborations right now. Right now the progressive community is so split. There's labor activists and recycling activists and health activists and poverty activists, and we're not all talking to each other. And so a big need right now is convenings, is investing for people to get together across silos and talk about this stuff. And I know that that's tough for funders because it's hard to have measurable outcomes. It's hard to quantify the goal. You don't have a really nice report afterwards to show your trustees what you funded. But it's really important to create the space for people in different sectors of society to come together, cross-silo, and examine the interconnectedness between their issues. When you look at the evolution of movements, for a long time movements are lists of good work happening. And something happens when those places where good work is happening start to get together, where it moves to become more than the good list. It moves to become a movement. And one of the ingredients you need in there are connections between the groups. And that has historically been an underfunded area because it is so hard to quantify the success of. So if you can take a risk and invest in convenings of people that you trust to get together and hash these things out, that would be great. I went to one last year in Washington, D.C. It was fascinating. It was a 2-day meeting with no goals at all, just to bring together people working on population and on environment. Because those two communities have been at odds with each other. And there's a lot of baggage and a lot of animosity. And there's a lot of people in third world countries who are sick of us consuming, 80% times more than them, saying that there's too many of you Bangladeshis. So there's that issue. There's a lot of anger and angst around coercive family planning programs. It's like a mess, that whole discussion about population consumption. So a funder funded a 2-day meeting for 30 people who work on population and environment to just get together and talk. It was phenomenal at breaking down misunderstandings, finding common ground, beginning to explore language that we could say we have to discuss population and consumption, reaffirming that there cannot be racism or classism in any approach. It was so beneficial, and there was no goals to the meeting but to just talk. To take a risk like that and have faith in the people that you bring to the table and then just let them talk is a really useful way to spend some money. Yes.
Hi, I really appreciate your presentation. And one thing that struck me is what you were talking about with the messaging and what you've done to create an inviting message and that optimism. Also, the piece that where you're connecting it's great to make individual buying choices, but keeping a systems perspective. So I was wondering, because I think you hit on this when you talked about a lot of times the environmental movement is very like finger wagging. So I was wondering what the reaction has been from the environmental movement or other pieces of the progressive movement around this, a different sort of messaging, and just what the reaction has been, basically.
Well, part of why the response was good is because of how we made this film. The film is based, the Story of Stuff film. If you haven't seen it, you can watch it at storyofstuff.org. The film is based on a live talk that I give. The full version is an hour-long live talk where I do that all by hands with a marking pen and a big piece of paper. And before I made the film, I went to a whole variety of organizations and gave that talk, and I said, I'm going to make a film, and I want to give this talk, and then I want you to give me really honest feedback. What part worked, what didn't, what should I do more of, what should I do less of? You know, that was a really useful process, because then it brought a lot of people into the process. It brought them in so that the Story of Stuff was really a community-wide project, because so many people had given input, and it also meant that the issues that so many people cared about were reflected in the film. So a huge diversity of people saw their issue on there, and they just 12 million people just saw it. So they're really, really happy. At the beginning when I made the film, I did get some pushback from my closest colleagues, which is like, I'm really from the super wonky environmental community. I love like those wonky reports and stuff. And I get that normal people don't read that, but I love that stuff. And so some of them pushed back on me and said, you're oversimplifying it. And I said, there's a difference between dumbing down and making it accessible. I'm making it accessible without dumbing it down. I did not cut corners on facts. I did not cut corners on politics. I said it like it is, but in an accessible, inviting way. So at first, some of them were worried that I was sort of trivializing really serious issues by making snarky jokes about them. And then we got 12 million views, and now they're lining up asking me, how can I do that? How can I do that? So I get requests all the time to come give talks to activists about how to talk about what they're doing in a way that people will understand. And I think it was a good lesson for all of us that we need to talk to people where they are. And most people, surprisingly enough, have not spent 20 years going to factories and dumps. Most people have done something else. So I need to start at the beginning, not start 20 years into the conversation. And with the Story of Stuff, I'm talking to people where they are. And so we're increasingly, as an environmental movement, learning that we're losing. First of all, I mean, we're really losing. We're losing on every single front on the environment, and we need to rethink what we're doing, and that needs to start with messaging. Because if you look at the polls of how many people care about the environment, it's the majority of people care about the environment, but they're not doing anything. The missed opportunity and where we need to focus now is not bombarding people with charts and graphs to show them there's a problem, like they get that, but to work with people together respectfully in a diverse way, in a fun and inviting way, to move that concern into action for real change. So there were some skeptics at first, but now everyone loves it. And everyone's like, I get 5 phone calls a day. Will you make a story of coal? Will you make a story of the World Bank? Will you make a story of whatever? Now people all like it. Hey, are we just about done? I think we're done, but Michael and I will both be here, so if anyone wants to talk specifically, I love talking about this stuff all day. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you so much.